So, hi Alex, thanks for giving up your time to join us today. I think most people now are hopefully used to seeing Chat and Mind faces on our podcasts and our vlogs, but I suppose just to give people a bit of an overview of what it's all about, and then you can tell us a bit about yourself, if that's all right. So the TekCurious Founder Series is all about, I suppose, shining a light on the really cool stuff that happens within the Southwest region. And it's a series where we speak to a number of founders for them to kind of share their stories, their journey, the lessons they've learned with the wider community. So I guess that's what it's all about. So if I hand over to Chad and we can fire the first question at you, and then we'll get cracking.
Excellent. Cheers, Carl. Alex, listen, thanks very much for coming on to our podcast. I think we'll start with the real opener, and then we'll drill down a little bit further going forward. But I just really want to understand, what is Virti? Give us an overview of what the business is.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's been interesting. So, I mean, just to give you a bit of background, my original career was in trauma and orthopedic surgery. So I was at Bristol Med School, trained around the Bristol region, was at Bristol Royal Infirmary, Bristol Children's Hospitals, had a couple of kind of tech companies around my medical training, and then left to kind of found Virti. And really, I guess before chatting about the technology, you know, the key thing really is why did we do it? Why did I leave my job? And the real reason for doing so was because how, you know, anyone learns or trains in any sector is relatively antiquated. So often it's either e-learning, it is using actors to do kind of role play for stuff like communication skills or leadership training, which is hugely important for any kind of organization. And so really I wanted to build a company, and specifically a technology that allowed people to access on-demand, experiential or on-the-job training, particularly sort of soft skills-based training, which is quite poorly taught in general, and is not particularly kind of like data-driven. So, I mean, to give you an idea about that, in healthcare, if I was practicing my communication skills for, you know, seeing someone in clinic, if I was in med school, I might do that with an actor or actress, and I would sort of have a conversation with them, trying to figure out their diagnosis by asking some questions. Then someone else would kind of assess me and would say, yeah, I think that was quite good, or that was poor, or, you know, don't look down at your shoes, or something like that. But it's, you know, I can't access it on demand. There's no actual data as to, you know, how good you are against your peers or anything like that. So with Virti, we built this sort of deep tech system, which is at its heart a cloud-based analytics platform from where people can manage training content. So a little bit like a learning management system, but with a focus on soft skills training. And so we sort of output that content through augmented reality and virtual reality headsets, as well as mobile phones and desktops. And you can kind of interface with the system through video as a user. You can interface through kind of computer generated avatars and graphics and things like that. But most importantly, we capture all the data about how you're interacting and what you're interacting with, and allow that to be compared to your peers. So basically, it's a corporate training platform used across sector, but predominantly in the medical sector because of my background.
That makes sense, Alex. And I suppose one of the questions I've always wanted to ask you is years of training to kind of get in to be a surgeon, if you'd like. I mean, that's a dedication in itself. And I suppose most people, you kind of go, maybe we'll go to university, then maybe do a PhD and spin out off the back of that. But to kind of go through all of that sort of hard work and grit to getting to be a surgeon, to kind of walk away from it. And I love one of your interviews or somewhere, you said that kind of moment where you had to tell, was it your grandmother or your nan or something, that I'm kind of going to give up all of this, I'm going to go and work in a tech business. And I guess I'd just be really intrigued to know the thought process, and I guess what made you think now's the time, after I've just kind of become qualified, I've kind of done all of this work, to kind of park that and go and do this?
Yeah, is that question sponsored by my mum as well to get you to answer that? So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I was always kind of like super techie and interesting kind of business and stuff around my NHS career. And I think it's worth saying, you know, trauma and orthopedics specifically, which is around, you know, fixing fractures or helping people to kind of walk again if they've got arthritis in their hip or their knee or anywhere else. It was just a super awesome job, and that's really the only thing I kind of wanted to do, actually. But then with, I suppose, as I was sort of training throughout the the NHS and seeing a lot of my friends in different sectors training, I think there is just a massive problem in terms of kind of postgraduate education and how people sort of perform and how they get better, and it's quite unequal and it's quite unfair. So, you know, even in this country, if I was going around the Bristol region, which is one of the best actually for medical training in the country, if not outside the country, if I went to one hospital on one specific day of the week, what I saw in you know that day of work and what I learned would be very, very different from my friend, you know, down the road at another hospital, albeit a very good hospital. So then if you extrapolate that and think, well, that's in, you know, Western healthcare, what happens in research limited environments, you might have someone who's you know, better than me, smarter than me, who's not being given really the learning opportunities to take themselves to the next level, and therefore provide their patients with the best care. And I think you can apply that to kind of any sector. So, you know, if you're an amazing sales professional and you don't have access to customers and environments that challenge you, or mentors that sort of take you to the next level, or abilities and ways to sort of practice your communication skills, you're always going to be sort of stuck at a certain level. And so our kind of umbrella term is human performance. How can we as a company help to maximize human performance? And that's a really, you know, it's a big ask, because we're basically saying, how do you digitize things that have normally been done using face-to-face training for, you know, hundreds of years actually, especially in healthcare, where people kind of learnt surgery through an apprenticeship model of going around and speaking and watching the best surgeons perform all around the world. And so for me, it was a problem that was big enough to say, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to quit my job and go kind of full time as kind of CEO and sole founder on Virti. And I've been super lucky, and it's been a really fun journey for me. And one of the reasons for starting the company is because I'm a massive learning and training nerd. So it's been fun for me to like learn everything as I kind of go along.
That's brilliant. And I guess then, so listening to you come from sort of a medical background, so I guess you knew the problem you were trying to solve. But then I guess, how did you go about, because unless you tell me you did this yourself, but I guess, how did you go about then building the tech element of it? Because I guess listening to you, you kind of knew the problem you wanted to solve and sort of maybe how you might go about solving that. But then how did you kind of build that MVP to be able to start going out to market and sort of sense checking it? How did you approach that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been pretty fortunate in my previous companies that I'd sort of run alongside my kind of either NHS training, or when I was in med school at Bristol, I'd sort of done them using kind of self-taught coding skills, which were pretty ropey to be honest. But with Virti, it was such a kind of big idea. That was, you know, part of the reason for me leaving to go full time on it was so that I could, you know, raise money in order to make it reality, and therefore hire, you know, really smart and talented people. And luckily, you know, in Bristol, we're fortunate to be a sort of really strong tech hub outside of you know, London or Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the world for that matter. So I teamed up with a bunch of my friends from the kind of games development community around Bristol. So Nils Hellberg and Lucas Roper, who'd previously worked at Opposable Games, the founder of which is Ben, who now runs a sort of VR lab in Bristol. So knew kind of those guys and had met them through a number of kind of events that were held around the Bristol area. And then really, you know, we from day one thought this is an idea that isn't just, you know, it's not a small idea. We want to take it to the, you know, every single, you know, employee on the planet basically. So to that effect, we knew that the US was going to be one of our biggest markets from day one. So we kind of went out to San Mateo in Northern California, in Silicon Valley, as a kind of group of 4 people, and built out this technology platform with, again, a specific focus on how can we make things like soft skills, communication skills, much more data-driven and effective to improve any kind of industry, not just healthcare, and then kind of, yeah, use healthcare as our sort of initial target market because of my sort of background.
Okay, so going back to the tech geek thing, is it fair to say this has always been in the blood as far as you're concerned? Is it, you know, as Carl's alluded to, you trained in a certain profession, but deep down underneath this, has there been that entrepreneurial spirit at an early age?
Yeah, so definitely. So it's I mean, it's interesting because I think like both education and kind of being an entrepreneur are sort of, I guess, somewhere in my genetics. So my great grandfather is actually from the northeast of the UK, and he ran basically sort of quite a large firm of sort of shipping sort of containers and things like that. So he's a big sort of shipping magnate and ended up being kind of the mayor of, or Lord Mayor of Newcastle at one point. So he was sort of super entrepreneurial. And then my mum, sort of on her side of the family, she's a teacher and things like that, and sort of was a headmistress of a sort of all-girls school in the northwest of the UK. So yeah, I probably got something like that. And then me, I guess, yeah, I'm just super interested in, you know, how things work, and when I was growing up, I was just a massive, or still am, a massive kind of video gamer, which is partly why, you know, Virti is very kind of like gamified in everything we do. And yeah, I mean, I think I fundamentally like solving problems for people. I like how technology interfaces to solve those problems. And interestingly, like that kind of, I suppose, thought process led me to a career in you know, surgery, specifically trauma and orthopedics, where a lot of what you do operatively is about your hand-eye coordination, is about getting angles right, a lot of sort of engineering type stuff when you're putting in things like hip or knee replacements. But equally, you can see someone's problem on an X-ray. You can talk to them, you can reassure them, and then you can, you know, do something that gets them back walking quite quickly. And it's the same with tech, really. So what I see is, you know, we're creating a product and a solution for our customers where we can provide that to them, and then, you know, instantly it can reduce the need for that sort of in-person training component. It can save them costs. It can improve knowledge retention and engagement. And so again, just, you know, super satisfying, and all about kind of like making an impact for people.
One of the things you mentioned then, obviously, sort of, by the sounds of it, some of the family come from sort of up north, shall we say. So, I mean, I love Bristol. You can probably tell from the twang of my voice that I'm kind of born and bred in the city. And I think there's amazing stuff that happens. But I guess I always like to know, why did you pick Bristol as your home? Because you mentioned the US, you mentioned Silicon Valley, and obviously the US being a real heavy sort of area in your business for you to focus on. So why set down roots here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess when I first came down to Bristol, it was for med school, and I just absolutely loved, you know, the kind of the mix of like the green open spaces, stuff like, you know, the Clifton Suspension Bridge, Wills Memorial, like some of the old buildings, and then the kind of, you know, the technology and the kind of fun part of the city as well, and it not being absolutely enormous, and having some, you know, some great links to places like Cornwall or the Cotswolds and things like that if you just want to, you know, bail out. So I'm at my heart secretly a country bumpkin, although I do quite a lot of flying and end up, you know, a lot of my time with some quite big organizations in big cities. But I mean, I think it's just super relaxing. I think certainly when if you're working in the NHS, absolutely. If you're founding a company, I think also relevant, you do want to, you know, protect your kind of, you know, your personal life, and you know, make sure you've got enough downtime, make sure you've got a good environment where you're, you know, you're living, you're building that up. And I think Bristol's just been awesome. So I was out in the US for pretty much all of last year, either on one coast or another, or on an airplane or somewhere else. So actually, although coronavirus has not been the best thing in the world, I think it's probably an understatement. It's been okay for me being sort of locked down in Bristol, because it's quite nice to be back and not traveling so much.
Makes sense. And I guess one of the things for me then on this is, you've won a number of awards recently, and you guys are sort of seem to be growing exponentially. And I guess kind of the success that you're tasting is probably what a lot of founders would love to achieve. And I suppose I was just intrigued to know how you found sort of scaling the business and growing it, because it's been in a relatively short period of time. So I'm sure that there's lots of insight in there that people would find really fascinating to know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Virti is a company, just for context, we launched basically in 2018, and kind of since then we've scaled up quite significantly. So we've now got kind of offices in the US, as you mentioned, Carl, and, you know, we're growing our revenues, and we've been super lucky in that I think, you know, the people we work with have been great on our customer side, completely got the product and have adopted it, you know, within their organizations, which has been great for us. I think there is always kind of like a challenge of scale. And I think, you know, for anyone starting a company, it's very, you know, the whole kind of startup space or later stage company space is very, very difficult to kind of get your head around, I think, when you're first starting out, because, you know, there are some companies that were founded in like, you know, 2006 or like even earlier, or, you know, whatever, and they're still kind of classed as like startups. And, you know, I think the thing that is slightly different in the United States, I think there's more focus played on how quickly you're growing as a company. And I think, you know, sometimes in the UK, people don't quite understand that, that actually your velocity of growth is probably a better function of like kind of how big you can become, basically, and how big a problem you're solving. So that's always been the goal from kind of day one with us, is to kind of grow as quickly as possible. So, I mean, there's always challenges kind of around that. I think on the people side, it's always challenging, you know, to get the best people into your business. I think when you're scaling up very, very quickly, you've got to be careful kind of not to cut corners. And by that, I mean, not thinking, oh, you know, we just need to get someone into a role now to fill it because we've got so much demand. You've got to have like a very data-driven hiring process. And you've also got to have the processes in place for those individuals to come in and immediately kind of, you know, plug in, offer value to the company, and be ramped to their kind of full capacity as soon as possible. So yeah, it's interesting. I think because I had a couple of companies that I'd basically ran either, you know, myself or with one or two other people previously, I had to do a lot of the operation stuff. Whereas I think, you know, especially if you're a young founder and you're coming in with like just an idea and don't have a huge amount of experience, that can feel quite overwhelming. And that's when you need to get in someone who's like a good co-founder or a good COO or an ops person. But for me, that was all about, you know, trying to keep it as organized as possible to scale and grow. And equally on the tech side, you know, it's the same thing. So if you're, you know, started off with like one person using the platform and then you ramp up to like 1 million in, you know, a really short space of time, you've got to make sure all that infrastructure is there or it becomes super sluggish. You know, you need your backups, you need a much larger tech team to make sure you've got all the security checks and all the kind of boring side of the tech outside the fun, sexy VR, AR gamified stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think I was fortunate. I had some really good mentors to kind of help me on that. I had sort of, you know, predicted some of those issues we might have if we were successful. And so we have been able to navigate that for the most part. But yeah, it's always kind of a trade-off for like how quickly you can go to you know, how much like infrastructure you need to like really bed down before you start going too quick.
Yeah, and I guess it's just balancing your time as well, isn't it? And balancing sort of what you feel you need to get off the ground first, and then put it in some sort of working order. Because I'm quite intrigued as to understand how you wore the hats, you know, marketing, finance, and everything like that. And you mentioned about bringing in individuals. And as far as you were concerned, what were the most important types of people to bring into the business immediately? Because you know, we talk to a lot of founders and they have different ideas of the right people to bring in at the right time. In your mind, and looking back, what were the first few key hires? It sounds to me like the development people. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, you know, we from day one have always been like product first, basically at Virti. So, you know, we're all around creating this very deep, very technical product, which solves unique problems for our customers, basically. So, I think absolutely like the tech team. In fact, every single person in the tech team, particularly Nils Hellberg, who's our CTO, who's the director of Bristol Games Hub, which is obviously one of the big co-working spaces around Stakes Croft, has just been awesome. And so I think, you know, getting that early stage team around the product and the technology, I think for most startup founders is going to be absolutely critical. I think once you've got that and you have, you know, you've shown you've got some elements of product market fit and you're beginning to get your first customers, you've then got to think about the kind of sales infrastructure. And I guess for, you know, for me, I wore, yeah, you're right. You know, I knew a lot of like the marketing stuff. I knew a lot of the sales stuff. I knew a lot of the ops stuff myself. So I was reasonably fortunate in that respect. But making sure, you know, you as the founder aren't doing everything. And specifically on the sales side, you can sometimes get conned into thinking you've got like product market fit if you're just like super engaging, you know the product, you know the customers, and you're hitting all the sales. So I think that's one thing that we did quite well, which was obviously I was closing out a significant amount of the sales kind of initially, but then, you know, without taking my foot, I guess, off the gas, you've got to give responsibility to other people. You've got to make sure that the processes that I was doing are reproducible by anyone. So someone who's not like a doctor or like has the title of like CEO or founder of the company, someone who's coming in as a new hire can sell to the customers and help them to understand how our system can help them with their problems, and equally understand their problems and needs just as kind of I could. So I mean, to that effect, our kind of next sort of key hires were then around sales. So we positioned that in the US, and we picked up a kind of VP of sales in North America in Houston, which is kind of in the middle between the two coasts for the time difference. And that was awesome. And then we basically kind of built out the whole sales team in the United States kind of around that, which has worked really, really nicely. But yeah, I mean, I think that's my tip is you can't, you know, don't rely on yourself like, well, ever, but for particularly on the sales side, make sure that you've got processes in place where other people can sell your product. So it is the product that's kind of closing deals, not just like you as a founder.
One of the common themes we hear from working with the myriad of startups in the region that we do is, I think, as you alluded to then, some of the businesses that are successful is because the founders can let go of what they're doing when they first set up and grow through the organization as the business grows and develops and as your role moves further up. But I guess the further up you move, the further away you are from originally what you set the business up and what you probably really enjoyed doing. And I guess for someone that has been successful, how have you managed that from a personal perspective in terms of sort of probably being much further away from the coal face, as to speak, as to sort of probably the bits that really excited you on sort of day one, that fire and passion that made you set up Virti, and sort of now sort of sat over here? How do you deal with that, and how have you taken yourself on that personal development?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, the fire is basically still there through every component of our business, which is really cool. So I'm pretty hands-on in kind of being a founder. I think I really enjoy sort of speaking and trying to help and coach basically every single person that we pick up. And I mean, one of the things I did relatively early on at Virti was make sure we've got kind of like an internal coaching culture for anyone we bring in. So in our hiring process, some of the things we look for are specifically stuff like coachability and interest in learning and what we term kind of like leveling yourself up, basically. So I do quite a lot of like internal coaching with kind of every member of the team, specifically the team leads in particular, so that they kind of continue to pass on that kind of coaching culture to everyone else. And they improve in their own jobs and also in kind of more, sort of like soft touch skills like prioritization, organization, things like that. I guess the other bits that I tend to do now are making sure I try and sit in on a lot of the main team meetings as frequently as I can, to make sure that if there's anything people are unsure about, I've got a good oversight of what's going on. And I think as well, there is that balance, and it's always kind of a bit of a struggle as to how much direction do you want to give people to how much freedom do you give people. And I think what we've done, which I've been very proud of at Virti, is I'm sure you guys and anyone listening know like OKRs and like kind of alignment tools like that. I absolutely hated them when I saw them. I was like, this is just absolute trash. This is just like some clickbait from like Google. That if you get good people into your team and they understand the company mission, you shouldn't have to be giving them like insane amounts of advice on what to do. They should in fact be better than you at the stuff that you're trying to do. So what we actually did was we trademarked our own kind of alignment tool called the Virti operating system, or the VOS2, which puts kind of vision and values. That's where you get part of the two from, the two V's. And then you've got objectives and obstacles. That's the two O's. And then you've got strategy and specific metrics. So it's really trying to, make our own alignment tools that everyone in the company has ownership of, without us like having to say, okay, you do this, you do that, you do that. People know what their team goal is, or their individual goal is, and how that affects the overall company mission. And then, you know, we've been super fortunate, and the people we've hired are all awesome. And you can see them, you know, week by week, month by month, growing with the company, which is for me personally one of the most rewarding things. And it's great to see that. So, I mean, even like today, we just had some of the sales team closing people that I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, how have you got into these accounts? That's awesome. Or just, you know, doing stuff they don't like, you know, cold calling people or pushing themselves to the limit. And it's just awesome to see them, you know, really enjoy doing that. So I think that for me as the founder has been how I've kind of got around it, which is, again, going back to some of the processes and going back to sticking to the bits that I enjoy, which is coaching and sort of training people up, talking about the platform, and helping probably more on the product side than I am on the like financial Excel charts. I've definitely handed that off quickly.
Just touching on that point then, we spoke to a founder a couple of weeks ago about the building of the culture of an organization, and obviously the culture changes as the organization gets bigger. Have you underpinned those cultures with the people in the organization? Because that comes from the bottom up, right? That is where you talk and sit down at some point and go, right, okay, what are the values of our organization? What kind of culture do we want? How did you define that? I mean, obviously you had specific, you know, your sort of bullet points and everything in terms of what you wanted to do from objectives, absolutely. But did you guys sit down and think about what the culture might perceive itself to be?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of like the Virti operating system and some of the other bits I talked about, like the coaching system, are all kind of come under the sort of culture, I guess, and that was one of the first things that I started actually doing. And again, I suppose it was because of my you know, want to basically scale the company quite quickly. I think having a really strong culture that's simple and clear, and every single person can implement. And I think the way that we think about things, we've got our kind of 3 core cultures. We've got values, and the values are basically how people kind of treat each other or how they adapt and do things. And then behaviors, and behaviors tend to be how people, you know, interface to the customers, or how they send emails and things like that. So our kind of main core cultures are be bold, be fast, be amazing. These are things that, you know, we don't just say, or we don't just talk about. We actively sort of hire people who map out some of these characteristics. So for each of the individual roles, we look at, you know, examples of how someone might have been bold. So, you know, have they taken initiative? Have they, you know, done something that wasn't requested of them? Have they done that quickly? Have they been fast? Have they got to the point really, you know, in a shortest period of time as possible? And then have they been amazing? So has the, you know, the end piece of work, or whatever it is they've been required to do, or maybe they've done it themselves, how has that kind of blown people's minds and led to something awesome? And really, I guess we kind of came to that because that's sort of how myself and the tech team approached a lot of stuff. It was always, you know, how can we just think outside the box? How can we be innovative? How can we push the limits as much as possible, being bold? How can we get that done as quickly as possible? How can we scale up as quickly as possible? But then how is the end product? You know, I always say internally, we're like Nintendo. We're not going to release anything until it's absolutely perfect. And then it's going to get, you know, your 9s and your 10s on your kind of review sites, right? We're not going to just chuck something out because there's a deadline coming up. So how can you be amazing? And that really, you know, that whole kind of ethos is then, you know, filtered down through that kind of coaching system, through the kind of onboarding system, but most importantly, actually in how we hire people, because we hire people into the culture, not trying to, you know, be a cult and indoctrinate people who might not be like that naturally.
That's good. And I suppose one of the things I always like to kind of just ask is sort of on the topic of investment. I suppose you speak to some founders who sort of want to try and bootstrap and grow organically because they want a bigger slice of a pie. And then you speak to other people who kind of go, no, look, from day one, I knew we were aiming to raise. And in my opinion, sort of a smaller slice of a much bigger pie is definitely the way I want to go. So I guess I'll be really intrigued to kind of know a bit about the journey you've been on that. And then I suppose some of what you know today versus what you knew back on day one when you first went out, and maybe just some of the insights and the lessons you'd be comfortable to share with people sort of about to embark on the start of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the first thing to say is that there's no best solution, and I think certainly for anyone who's either thinking about starting a business or perhaps has, I think there's a lot of stuff like in the press and the media where it it really celebrates people who've raised like a load of money basically, or they've done something that's required them to invest, and actually that's partly driven by venture capitalists who are basically funding some of the the media outlets who promote that stuff. I think taking a step back to anyone, I suppose, in how they want to sort of better themselves. I absolutely love my job in the NHS. I very happily would have done that for the next sort of 40, 50 years of my life. And that's a fantastic, very rewarding job. And I think we've seen during COVID, the extent to which kind of health professionals will go to kind of help people. And that should be, celebrated as a, fantastic kind of career. For me personally, it was kind of about the challenge. So I had also kind of bootstrapped a company. That was really good. Again, I've been super lucky that nothing I've done has been a complete disaster yet. Touch wood, could happen tomorrow. But with that previous company that grew organically, slowly, but some really, really good revenues, and almost as like a kind of lifestyle kind of passive income business, which again is fantastic. And there are lots of people who have those type of businesses, and you can take time off whenever you want, you can go abroad, you can let someone else run it. It's a really kind of nice way to sort of generate some income. With Virti, because we were building this deep technology product, and we really, the focus was on solving this massive problem of how do you make experiential education affordable and accessible for everyone, and how do you make soft skills training in particular more data driven. That would have been almost impossible to bootstrap, because we would have, by the time we'd built some of the technology over a period of like a year or 2 years, and built up the team, the technology either would have moved on, or people would have had to do it around their job. So the whole business model and the concept wouldn't have worked. So for Virti, we decided to take some external investment. We did sort of, we've raised, at the time this goes out, I'm guessing we'll probably be in the region of kind of just over sort of $2 million to date. We've got another investment round we'll probably be announcing next year at some point. But the reason for doing so was so we could hire some great people early on, build the technology, prove it worked, and then start commercializing it. So my kind of advice on the raising investment side is a little bit counterintuitive. So it's basically build a good business before you start raising money. I think some people see venture capital as a way to kind of, I suppose, kickstart their business idea or something like that. I think it's good to have an idea, but it's better to execute on it. And if you can have some data, whether that's ideally revenue, or growth, or it's you've built an amazing product, or you've got some metrics of like product market fit, if you then take that to an investor, it's a much easier, more fun conversation, both for you and for them, to be honest. And so that's basically what we've done, and that's been great. I think you do have, obviously, if people are investing in your company, the external responsibilities to them to make sure that you're kind of delivering on everything that you have said in terms of revenues or products. So that, I suppose, brings in like a little bit more stress, but not massively. And I think if you get some really good investors, they should support you kind of through your journey. So that in summary is my kind of reflection on the whole process, which is, I think whatever you do, as long as you enjoy doing it, you will win, and there's no best option, to be perfectly honest. And I think if you are seeing people who've raised loads of money as the best companies, or like the best people that you want to be like, I'd probably question that, actually. And yeah, just do stuff that makes a real difference to people and that you enjoy doing.
And I think your point's really valid. I mean, it's always shouted about, isn't it? X companies raised this much, and you kind of wrongly look at these companies raising these obscene amounts of cash. You kind of go, wow, that must be amazing. And I think early stage founders, that's the goal for a lot of them, is kind of go, wow, I want to go after that. But one of the things that's come up a lot in this, I'm intrigued to get your view on it, Alex, is picking the right VC or angel or whoever you, but how did you go about picking who you wanted to work with? Because I'm sure there probably just wasn't one person sort of who said, yeah, look, we'd like in. How did you pick that, and what are some of the maybe the metrics that you share with other people, or some of the things that you found have worked for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and again, we've been pretty fortunate because we had built a business that was showing growth, really. So we're a little bit, I suppose, unusual in the fact that we got to generating revenues quite quickly and actually to profitability like really, really quickly in under 2 years, which was just mainly credit, I've got to say, to the tech team and some of the people we hired, actually. I think from a VC point of view, there's two things that I would kind of recommend. So first, I think, if you're a business owner, having like actual empathy for the VCs, because they get pitched to all the time, every single day. They see hundreds of thousands of companies, in their lifetimes, and especially for the more kind of, I guess, like financial venture capitalists who maybe don't have a specific like industry thesis or like a tech thesis, i.e. they maybe don't know very much about healthcare, or they don't know about like the latest AI technology. You've got to keep your messaging really, really simple. You, especially when you're, raising like an angel or a seed round and you're like doing absolutely everything in the company, and as you say, wearing all the hats, it's really easy to just get completely absorbed into everything about the tech and everything about the business, and talk a million miles an hour and overpower people with everything. I think you just need a really, really simple, concise message like, this is what we want to do. This is the size of the market we're going after, which is why we think it's going to be a success. This is how we're going to get there. And this is what we're going to develop in the future with your help, basically. And I think, that's step one, keeping things really, really simple in terms of your messaging and in terms of how you're going to get to, be a $1 billion company or turn over 100 million or whatever it is you want to do on the financial side. And then I think, you need to illustrate that story using kind of like data and, whether it's sort of your classic like hockey stick graph showing you like your number of users or your revenue, going up exponentially. That's going to really, really sort of entice people. I think once you've kind of done that and you've packaged it all together and you can show people that you're, either growing quickly or you've just got a really, really compelling business they want to invest in. My kind of advice then is really put them on the spot and do due diligence on your investors, because it's a little bit like, having any kind of relationship. You're going to be with these people for 5 or potentially 10 years or even longer. And, number one, you want to make sure that you can get on with them, and you want to make sure that they've got your back, because typically if you're raising money, you should be raising at a time when you're in a period of strength, basically. So either you've got a really long runway, or you've done something really, really great to grab people's attention. So naturally, the investors are all going to be, wanting to be kind of part of your round if you've run it, through a good process. But you don't know what they're going to be like if things suddenly, get difficult. And you want people that are in your corner that remember the mission, who are going to offer you, solutions to some of the difficulties you're facing. So I'd make sure that you can really get on with them. And I think one of the ways to do that is just have lots and lots of meetings with them and just get to know them, and not be too pushy, and just, keep it relatively kind of conversational all the way through. After that, I think, you want to be looking at things like, okay, who else have these investors invested in? Go and have a chat to all the other founders that they've invested in. Ask some other founders in the space who might know them, especially if you're, again, first time kind of to the sort of investment rodeo. Try and figure out who's a good investor, who's not a good investor, who's not helped companies, and do your due diligence on them. And then it just becomes a thing of who's going to add the most value from their kind of networks, and who's going to help you in terms of their kind of like capabilities, and who's got the most kind of, follow-on capacity to do future investment rounds and things like that. So again, I go back to like simplicity, which is if you find someone you get on with and they're giving you the terms you want, and they're going to help you take your business to the next stage, snap them up. If you've got any reservations, if you've got a gut feeling you're compromising, really look internally and have a good think about it, because it's a long relationship you're kind of getting yourself into.
Excellent, Alex. We've probably got time now for one more question. Work-life balance? Do you have one? What do you have time for yourself? Do you actually manage to, when you're away from the flights and the scaling up and everything, do you think it's important to have a work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure you've probably interviewed people who founded companies and they basically look miserable, and we know who these people are, and they probably bitten off more than they can chew, and that's like really sad, and it's not good. I mean, I think for me personally, and this is again just bigging up everyone in the healthcare sector. When I was doing my job in trauma and orthopedic surgery, and I was driving around all of Bristol, to go to or the whole of like the sort of southwest, I should say. So going up to places like kind of Cheltenham or Gloucester or down to Yeovil or Taunton, getting up early in the morning and then doing a night shift where you might get woken up at 4 a.m. With someone who's been involved in the road traffic collision, and you're having to operate on them overnight. Everything else suddenly seems a lot less stressful. Let me tell you that. So, if someone's complaining about, oh, I haven't raised like enough money, or, we're going to get out of business, like, who cares? In the grand scheme of things, that's not a life or death, decision for the most part. So I think that there's, that element of it. So I think having some perspective on, if things go wrong, which they do sometimes, and that could be something like, you make a mishire, or you lose a sales contract, which happens to every single person. No company is absolutely perfect, but I think having that in perspective and dealing with that in a way that we're not either beating yourself up or even worse, beating your team up about it. So I mean, I guess for me personally, there's that, and then I think actually, I think again the team we've built is just so fun, and everyone kind of gets on with each other so well. And I've got to just do some awesome stuff with Virti. So I a little bit cliche, but I never really feel like I'm kind of going into work, to be honest. Even doing kind of Zoom calls, whether it's team calls or customer calls, I just love speaking to everyone we kind of work with, whether it's on the customer side, the employee side, chatting to yourselves on kind of podcasts and stuff or interviews. It's really fun and rewarding. And I guess for us, because we scaled up quite quickly, I got to visit some really awesome places. So obviously it'd been kind of all over the US. I'd never been to kind of Houston or Texas before, founding the company. Never would have potentially had a reason to go there if I was still working the NHS, but that's a fantastic city with some great people. Been out to kind of China, all these awesome places. So I think for me it's just always fun. So I am kind of, I guess, always switched on at all times. But I think having selective breaks where you take some time just to chill out, reflect. I'm obviously dressed and continuously wearing sports gear, so my kind of out is always like doing sports or exercise and stuff, and that's often where I can take some time just to kind of decompress. If I'm doing any like kind of CrossFit or boxing or anything, that's where I can sort of take my anger out in a punch bag or one of my buddies with some pads. So I think making sure you look after yourself in that respect is super important, and making sure you enjoy things, because stuff will get difficult, and you do need a little bit of help if you need to talk to people and say things are not going as planned, and that could be either someone in your team or someone external like an advisor, or just some friends to chat to as well. So for me it's been super fun. Long may it continue.
My final question, just a quick fire one. So I suppose your absolute top piece of advice that you've taken from all of your time in life so far and at Virti, what would that one absolute golden nugget be?
I'd say 100% on this is have fun. So whatever you're doing, whatever job you're in, whatever you're doing, make sure you enjoy doing it. And if you're going into work and you're miserable and you don't like it, there is always another option, always. And I think, if stuff, especially if you've got your own company, if you don't find that fun, well, it's your company, you re-engineer it so it is fun. Everything I do, I just absolutely love doing at the moment. And as you say, we've been super lucky recently. to pick up some really cool awards like the Time kind of best 100 inventions of 2020 and some other cool stuff we've got coming out. So that's fun, that's cool. Helping customers is cool and fun. Meeting new team members is cool and fun. So yeah, just do fun stuff is my advice. Brilliant.
Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on our podcast, and wish you best for the future. I think the awards are just the start of more great things to come. So thank you for coming along.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.